I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here. Happy Monday to all of you, and thank you for being here. Those of you who are with us through YouTube or Facebook Live. I understand that Facebook is down right now, so people might not be getting this normal feed. Tekken, do you know something about that? I think AZ was on asking you, and you said Facebook is down now, or do you know that?
Yeah, it just this morning it worked, and then all of a sudden it stopped. And on my desktop and on my set, I think the platform has crashed, and so maybe maybe we're witnessing the end.
well, well, we certainly will see. But
Yes, we'll see.
hopefully, people can enjoy this program, if not now, in an
Mhm.
archived access to it a little later on. Mickey Moore, how you doing, man?
Great. Thanks for having me, Al. I always love to be here. And, Facebook is always down for me. So today's no different than any other day in my life,
Nothing special,
my
huh?
non-social media life.
Yeah, so,
Okay. Well, listen, let me do this. Monday, we've invited you and other candidates to talk about the reasons you are running for office for city council. And as we near the election, because voting is open right now, people can vote. I want to double down on the intentionality of ensuring that your voice and your vision is heard. So, without further ado, I'm going to ask each of you to take 10 minutes to start with. And as if this is the first time, introduce yourself again, introduce your issues, and invite people to support your candidacy, to vote for you, and tell the voters what they need to know about you, about the ward you want to serve in, and about our city. I'm going to start with you, Tekken.
okay. So again, and for those who don't know me, my name is Teken Aida, and I am a candidate in the 7th Ward here in Minneapolis. The 7th Ward is vast and represents, I think, a snapshot of the diversity of our citizenry, in terms of the fact that it houses some of the poorest members of our community, all the way up into the lake area where some of the richest in the state actually reside. And it also houses a good portion of the business district of downtown. It houses a good amount of the institutions that uphold our community and represent our values. And it also holds many of the precious resources that we are known for in the City of Lakes, which is our parks, our Grand Round system, and our lakes systems. And so it is what I call the beating heart, or maybe I'm changing to be the expanding, contracting lungs of our community. And so I'm running to be a bridge between this community and the rest of the city. For far too long, way beyond even Lisa Goodman, our current incumbents, 23 going on 24 years in office. But even before that, I feel that beating heart or expanding, contracting lung pulmonary system of the city has been disconnected from the rest of our community body. And so again, I am a bridge candidate. I am a bridge individual. I was born in South America, in Colombia. I was abandoned and left on the street. I was taken into an orphanage, and within a year or so was adopted by a very traditional Minnesota couple, very Swedish on one side and very Welsh, Norwegian on the other, with Canadian roots and a coat of arms from Wales. A champion wrestler, most likely bought or something during William IV. So nothing I would say too grand, but still. And yet I was this little black child raised in the old, what I call the old Minnesota, and went through a lot. Al, Diana probably faced things when I was a little kid going to school that you all faced, or that your uncles or even maybe grandparents or parents faced when they were struggling for integration and equal rights with whites and whatnot. And so my analysis is built on this lived experience. Also growing up in a very educated house. My grandparents and parents were both all public school teachers. I grew up around, university level books and things, and was a history buff. And so I'm coming with that well-rounded analysis of who and what we are as a people in Minnesota, as well as the fact that I am Black, I am Latino, I am an immigrant, I am LGBTQ, I am a HIV positive survivor, on and on and on. And so even though I may have a good amount of privilege, I will never deny the fact that I am just the same as those who have been disenfranchised, discredited, and harmed in this community for the last 100 years, definitely since the 50s, mid-century last. And so I am running to, again, be that bridge that can unite our community and bring the 7th Ward back into the body politic of the entire Minneapolis family. I come with 22 years of business experience. I ran, owned, operated my own small business here downtown that started in 1996. I moved to Minneapolis 2 weeks after graduating from high school in 1994. I will be 46 tomorrow. So, I've been around and grown in this community. I'm bringing that outside of government, lived and executive business experience to a city hall that I think has for too long been allowed to be corrupt and to exist in its own silo. I am running to represent not just the 7th Ward, but all of Minneapolis, and specifically those community members who look like me, to make sure that I can utilize and apply the power of the 7th Ward and the 7th Ward community to uplift those voices who have not been heard or engaged by our current councilperson, and make sure to demand that they are at the table as we work, as we strive towards creating what I call the next Minneapolis miracle. That Minneapolis miracle, I think, started in maybe the early 70s, when we were really proud of our Fortune 500 companies and our pastoral lifestyle, our education system, our healthy living, and on and on and on. But the problem was that Minneapolis miracle was only including a small percentage of us. This time, after these last 24 years, when disparities in home ownership, in business ownership, incubation, in our public schools funding, in Black and Brown and Indigenous achievement and flourishing, has only widened and just sunk into a never-ending sinkhole. Definitely in the last 23 years of Lisa Goodman, it is time to realize as a community that all must be invited to this next vision board, this next policy-making table, and I'm here to do that. I could go on and on, but I'm going to let Mickey talk now, and then we can have a robust back and forth.
Touch on 3 or 4 key issues. One is crime. What's
Absolutely.
your status? Well, in fact, if you would take a minute, and Mickey, you do the same thing. The several charter amendments
Yes.
really guide the public through the critical choices that are on the table right now for how Minneapolis will proceed.
Move forward.
So
Yes.
describe the amendments and your position on them. And to do that briefly, Mickey, I'll ask you to do the same thing as well.
So Amendment 1 is how we are going to move forward as a system of governance. If we are going to continue, or if we're going to have a strong and empowered chief executive and a legislative council, or if we're going to have an executive council and a cuckolded mayor. I don't know how else to really say it. Coming from 22 years in small business, where the buck stopped with me. If we were celebrated, I received the calls of congratulations. If there was a problem, you better believe I heard from our clients about it. The buck, like I said, stopped with me. So Amendment 1, I do support a strong chief executive in the body, in person of the mayor, and a legislative council. I believe that 13 or 14 feudal lords is going to be disastrous for our community. I think we already know, based on last summer, how that's going to look. we should avoid it at all costs. And I know that many people are unhappy with our mayor and have been unhappy with several going into the back. Well, that puts the onus on us to actually find better mayoral candidates who better represent us. Amendment 2, public safety. Are we going to dismantle the current MPD and develop a new Department of Public Safety, et cetera, that will possibly be created in 90 days, but we have no idea what that would look like, what have you. Of course, a few Mondays back, Councilmember Ellison said that abolition is never going to happen and it's not going to ever be on the docket, nor is on the docket, to which I say, then shame on you, all of you in office. Why have you allowed this divisive rhetoric to literally pull our community apart? I, as a person who is of color and who is Black, I cannot support it. I have talked to many African-American leaders in this town. They do not support it. We are not going to vote to dismantle MPD. What we are going to do is finally, with the right people at the table, including me, we're going to roll up our sleeves and do the heavy and deep and uncomfortable work of actual reform and gaining control of our contract with the Federation and how our peacekeeping officers are scouted, developed, trained, and sent out into the community. So I am not going to vote to do that. I believe I have not heard, and I'm still as confused. That's why I said I believe. I'm still as confused as many in our community are, because again, shame on activists and the government for putting out amendments that are so poorly written, so poorly crafted, on purpose, I believe, that no one really understands what they're voting for. And so some people may not vote at all, or they may side with the status quo. The last one is rent control. As a deeply affordable housing renter, I stand on the side of rent stabilization. I tie it to historic preservation and deep tax incentives. It is something that we need in Minneapolis. It will house our elders, our differently abled. It will house our teachers, our firemen, our police officers that choose to live in our community with us, and those students, artists, low-income, working-class families that cannot suffer the exorbitant rising rents that are happening during the Goodman agenda era. And so I stand on the side of, I will vote yes on Amendment 3 for rent stabilization. Mickey, your turn.
Mickey, how you doing? So take the time you need and reintroduce yourself one more time, which is always great. Tell your story, and then weave into that your examination of the 3 charter items on the ballot for Minneapolis.
Okay, thank you so much, Al. My name is Mickey Moore, and I'm running as a candidate for City Council in the 9th Ward. Now, for the 9th Ward, for those of you who don't know, it's basically Lake Street from 35W up to Hiawatha Avenue, and from parts of 24th Street all the way to 38th Street. So the 9th Ward is where the police station was burned down. It's where a lot of our civil unrest occurred on Lake Street last summer. It encompasses portions of the George Floyd Square area. It's some of our most heavily commercialized business districts and corridors. It's also a lot of homeowners, a lot of renters, about a 50-50 split. It's got some larger buildings. It's where one of the few Target shopping centers is located. We've got a grocery store in the 9th Ward. We've got a hospital in the 9th Ward. We've got Global Midtown Market in the 9th Ward. So it's really a mixture of some small immigrant-owned, minority-owned, smaller businesses, a lot of medium-sized businesses, including some commercial enterprises, the Smith Foundry, et cetera, and even some larger chain franchises that exist in the 9th Ward. So it's really a mixture of a lot of different economic development levels, and it's a core central economic driver in our city. I was born and raised in South Minneapolis, lived here all my life. My mother's a returned Peace Corps volunteer, and so she instilled a lot of the core democratic values in me right from the womb. Tolerance, equality, peace, generosity, sharing what you have, social safety net structures. As a fatherless child of a single mom, obviously, I was a product of a lot of the community programs that were around when I was a kid. whether that was latchkey after school, whether that was the early breakfast program for public school kids, so you have to take the bus at 6 o'clock in the morning. The boys club, they called it the boys club back then. Now it's boys and girls. The Boy Scouts, the Pillsbury House. We had something back then called Hospitality House. The YMCA programs, all of these programs, and the Park and Rec Sports, these programs and services really served to give me a bit of an identifier, a character building opportunity, a chance to find out who I was. And to give you an example, the Park and Rec Sports that I took part in from a very early age helped to define me as an athlete. And my athletic skills grew through high school until I was a high school state champion. And it was that high school state champion athletic level ability that got me a full ride scholarship to the University of Minnesota. So you can really trace what I was able to accomplish back to a very young age as a little kid, really being fostered into these different programs and being allowed to achieve my highest potential. One of the reasons why I'm running today is because a lot of those same opportunities just don't exist. It is absolutely heartbreaking, and I know everybody here agrees with me, to see our city, which is capable of so much, and we have seen in our history the great achievements from our city. But at the same time, we don't see them now. What we see now are crisis level problems that have been allowed to spin out of control with it seems like absolutely no leadership at all trying to push back on these problems. So I feel compelled to offer my experience, my expertise, my leadership to try to provide some professional responsibility back into city government. What we've seen from our city government has just been a complete abdication of professional responsibility. In fact, what we see most of the time is nothing more than political grandstanding, where people get together and seem to not care at all if problems are solved or if solutions are reached. And we have to find a way to put aside political issues and political differences and just focus strictly on coming up with solution-oriented strategies that will solve some of these most critical problems. In the 9th Ward, we're faced with a public safety crisis. Crime is on the rise in the 9th Ward. Just recently, I got a call in the middle of the night, not in the middle of the night, about 9 o'clock at night, from one of the inspectors on the police department telling me that it was a quadruple shooting on 27th and Bloomington. And the reason why I want to point this out, it's not that shootings are so rare over in the 9th Ward. We have them all the time. But I want to point out that on 27th and Bloomington, that specific corner, there is one of the few, I think there's only 25 or 30 of these in the city, closed circuit police video cameras mounted on the streetlight. So this quadruple shooting took place right at the exact spot where the police had already determined this is a criminal hotspot and it required a closed circuit TV security camera. So this isn't an issue of crime getting out of control and we can't figure out where it's happening. We know precisely where crime is happening and we are still handicapped to be able to do nothing about it. We also have a business devastation issue in that our business districts and commercial corridors are still, after 18 months, boarded up storefronts and broken glass. These are businesses that it's difficult to explain this. I've got 30 years of business experience in this city. So I understand how difficult it is to operate a successful business under the best of times. Mm-hmm. You need the support, not just of the community, but of the government as well. And I've been extremely fortunate to be well supported by this community. I've got a loyal client base, and one of my businesses has been around for 25 years and counting, still at the top of its game. I actually began the natural hair care industry in Minnesota through my operation at the Braid Factory. But what is really difficult to have to accept is that 18 months on, businesses are still lacking the fundamental support from our city to just restore themselves to a level playing field. And let me be clear, these are businesses that we can't afford to let fail. I remember, people probably remember when we talked about some of those giant banks that were going bad and our country declared them as too big to fail because they were so rich and so powerful, we just couldn't let them go. I will tell you that these businesses on Lake Street, many of these minority-owned and immigrant-owned businesses are too precious to fail. Some of these businesses employ people and are owned by people who are the sole earners for their family, including family that they still have back in their home countries. So the economy that we drive through these businesses helps to keep families afloat all over this world, from Africa to South America to Central America to Asia. We need to think about the precious nature and the critical importance of these businesses. Working with immigrant businesses and immigrant communities has been something I've worked on for a long time. I opened the Braid Factory as an opportunity to develop economic opportunities for East African immigrant women. I started an international phone card wholesale operation where I work specifically with businesses from all over the world. And it's just something that's very personal to me. So when I see our city allowing these particular businesses to fail, it's really an unfair and an unfortunate set of circumstances, because it's more than just what we see here on Lake Street. It's more than just our residents. These businesses are collecting money that they send back all over the world, to the Dominican Republic, to Haiti, to El Salvador, to Honduras, to Brazil, to Sudan, to Kenya, to Ethiopia, to war-torn Middle Eastern nations that have been suffering for decades. And now that pipeline of funds and economy and ability and food and the very lifeblood of those families and residents are just being cut off. And that's something we have to deal with immediately. So the last thing I want to talk about briefly in terms of the Ninth Ward is something that I hear that Tekken touched on too, and that is the absolute disconnect between our residents, our business owners, our constituents, and the elected officials that are supposed to serve them. We have changed in this city so much over the last 20, 25 years. Maybe it's connected to the amount of money that city council members are now earning, well into the six figures. When I was a kid, they had to keep their day jobs. Now they don't even think about a day job. They're making so much money. But our residents feel disconnected, which is why in both Tekken's ward and in my ward, if you look back over the last 5 municipal elections, our voter turnout hovers around 25%. That's abysmal. A lot of people don't recognize that. They think Minnesota is a high voter turnout state, which is true for presidential elections. We lead the nation. But when it comes to our municipal elections, we are abysmal. Our turnout is pathetic. And we have to start changing that and addressing some of these core issues as to why we've gotten ourselves into this problem. Now, I want to just mention, people can go to my website, weneedmore.org. They can call me. My phone number is well advertised, and I love to answer my phone and talk to people specifically about their issues and concerns anytime. So if you could take advantage of doing either one of those things, I encourage you to. But I want to talk about those ballot initiatives.
Yeah.
Number one, the structure of our government. A lot of people have heard the term strong mayor, weak mayor. And while I'm a business owner and I absolutely believe in the need for a strong executive where decisions are made, where the most important decisions come down to one person deciding what's best for everybody. That's critical. It's critical in a business and it's critical in a city. And I agree that we need a strong mayor in Minneapolis. I wish we could have come about it in some other way than to craft some gimmicky charter amendment and ballot initiative. I wish we could have grown a grassroots strong mayor through building a consensus of voters or through a response to crisis, to lead at a time of crisis and respond with strength that way so that the city just rallies around somebody like we had in the past. Donald Frazier was a strong mayor. Sharon Sells Belton was a strong mayor and led as strong mayors, despite being in this exact same system that we're in right now. But I think our dysfunction has reached a level where we cannot rely on any chance for things to get worse or even to stay the same. And so this strong mayor ballot initiative, we have to accept as our best choice right now and our best solution to a very serious problem where we've got too many cooks spoiling our broth. And we need a strong mayor to take lead of this city and bring us in the direction that we need to go. The second ballot initiative was public safety. And should we replace the Minneapolis Police Department? I've never heard of such a dangerous and irresponsible initiative as this. It is just absolutely absurd that we have allowed this issue to get to this point. Obviously, we need police. We are in the throes of a crime wave that we haven't seen in generation. Maybe it's the worst we've ever seen. Violent crime is at an all-time high. We're talking about the killing of people every week, including children. We have to do whatever is necessary to put a stop to this, and that means more police. It means more police resources. It absolutely means more police accountability. But at the same time, we need to bring in an effective operating procedure so that our police and our community feel like we're making progress in solving some of these criminal-related problems. Our last issue is the rent stabilization, or a lot of people like to call it the rent control ballot initiative. Unfortunately, as high as rents have become, rent control policies aren't the solution. They have shown, and economists agree, that they have more counterproductive and negative side effects than they have benefits. While a small select group of people might benefit by having their rents not go up when they would have, the vast majority of people suffer because we lose supply. We lose incentive to new development. We lose the opportunity to focus on the mom and pop property owners who provide over 90% of our affordable housing as it is. What we need to do is focus on solving our affordable housing crisis by attacking the problem where it truly lies, in the supply and demand dynamic, by transitioning renters into home ownership and changing some of those gaps that my brother Tekken talked about in terms of our home ownership gap, our generational wealth gap, our opportunity gap, our economic opportunity gap. Home ownership and property ownership is one of the fastest and most secure ways of really transitioning people into that second level of wealth and accumulation of wealth that can be transformative for not just them, but generations of their family to come. It's critical. And there are other ways in which we can focus on increasing our supply and simultaneously focusing on lowering our demand. Our city has for years just prioritized rental development to the exclusion of everything else. And that is part of what has brought us to this problem now. Right now, we need to focus on finding the accessible vacant lots, abandoned properties, problem properties, underused properties, of which there are many in this city. Every ward has them. And we need to focus on developing these properties into usable and functional, affordable housing options, whether that's a public housing option, whether that's purchasable apartments or condominiums, whatever we have to do to start providing our most underserved communities that access that they've been denied for so long. That's how we solve the high rents. That's how we solve the underlying affordable housing crisis that we're facing in our city.
You know, I absolutely disagree with Mickey's analysis on rent stabilization, but I agree with some of his prescriptions, specifically the last one. And it really applies here in Loring Park. You know, at the end of my block, we have a gorgeous 100-year-old building that I actually lived in the mid-90s that Lisa Goodman is allowing to go into disrepute and disrepair. It has been mostly vacant for years. And since last summer's George Floyd tsunami and civil unrest and meltdown, it has been taken over by sex traffickers and drug dealers. And it's now a sex trafficking and drug den. And the council person and the police and the neighborhood executive director, who's also a charter member, and everyone knows about this. The neighborhood has called the police. I don't even know how many times. We've filed reports, we've talked to people, everyone is involved, and our incumbent will do nothing. I sent out an email urging her to act, talking about how this was a very, a prime opportunity for her to lead and to demonstrate our values in real time, in the exact same ways that Mickey was just talking about. This beautiful building, I went in and did a tour. I know someone who's, I don't know, the owner is allowing him to squat there, you know, and he's the one person who's kind of allowed and everyone else is crazy. We went in with some land bank representatives and some people from the neighborhood. It is still, at least a few months ago, in pristine condition. Woodwork, I mean, it has not changed in probably 50 or more years. And And yet it has slowly, in the last few months specifically, it's just started to deteriorate. Broken windows, shattered glass, needles everywhere, and whatnot. Yet it could be first-time home ownership opportunity. It could be deeply affordable housing. It could be put into a land trust and invested in so that we can hold on to this property to house our neighbors. It is historic preservation, possibility for that. The list of how it could be applied to our stated values is endless, yet the incumbent is going to allow it to deteriorate because once it has become too far gone and too expensive to rehab, well, her investor and developer friends like Steve Min and that family can come in, knock it down, and put up a luxury high rise, or what is it, a 5-on-1 or whatever they call it, cheap housing that they build these days, and that will destabilize what is still a over 100-year-old neighborhood. Most of this was actually original gentrification, 1920, 1921. There's some housing that was built just down on Spruce that was for servicemen who were coming back from World War I. And there is still, I think, three at least houses that might be from the late 1800s that are here, as well as going up Loring Hill, and there are some historic houses up there. So this is something that we need to nip in the bud right now so that it doesn't destabilize what precious, deeply affordable housing we still have, and also the historic homes that we have in this neighborhood as well. And it's an opportunity for us to apply what Mickey was just talking about, which would then be living our values in real time. And that's what we're trying to do here, as opposed to allowing business as usual to keep spiraling our community out of control.
You're muted, Al.
Thank you. I appreciate, you guys have sort of a shared vision of community and desire for civic awareness, engagement, respect, etc. But I'm going to ask you to further differentiate or delineate your differences around that area of rent control, rent subsidy. And Tekken, you just concluded sort of sharing that you agreed with some of the strategies, with certain things you did not agree with. Tell me what those things are specifically. And then Mickey, I want you to respond. And I want to acknowledge that Alicia Smith is here. She's a candidate for the park board from South Minneapolis. And once you guys finish this, I'm going to go to Alicia and ask her to talk about her candidacy in her community as well.
So for decades, I've been what I call a quintessential Minneapolitan, but I've also been an honorary New Yorker. I'm often in San Francisco, bigger metropolitan cities in our nation. I have many friends, including my first partner and his two children, who live in rent-stabilized housing around our country. He lives in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, where he is able to be a New York Times recognized playwright and raise his two foster children, who will soon be permanent members of our family. Rent stabilization works. It keeps our communities together. Of course, because we are so lured by a market-driven system, and we are only exposed generally to market-driven real estate invested data. Of course, we're going to hear all the bad and how it can, do this and destabilize that. But I say that that's not really true. In New York and in San Francisco, where there is rent stabilization, development and gentrification is booming. Luxury high-rises are going up everywhere, every day. There's no lack of new building and construction. So I don't fully understand that. Yes, there's a problem in rent-stabilized units, and definitely in those that are not, where the owners are not keeping the buildings up. They're not reinvesting in those properties to make sure that they're up to code, or make sure that they meet our current living standards. And so I just deeply, as someone who knows and has enjoyed being able to lay his head in rent stabilized units around our country, again, I know that this is able to provide precious housing for those members of our community that actually keep our communities vibrant, that keep our children educated, that keep our communities safe. It also, and this is so important, is one of the ways that our traditional American inner city elders are able to stay and age in place. Here where I live, we have many people who are in their 60s, 70s, going on 80s, who live in deeply affordable housing and who are on a fixed income. Rent stabilization will help them stay and age in place, because the next option is a tent down by the park, or maybe assisted living, and many cannot afford that. So that's my deepest disagreement with Mickey and many others, many friends across the city who are rent control is bad. Well, no, those of us who are a bit more cosmopolitan and have lived and or experienced life in other cities, bigger cities, more I don't know, just bigger cities know that no, it's not that. It's actually a marvelous tool in the toolbox of keeping communities together and providing deeply affordable housing.
Mickey, tell me if I'm wrong, Mickey Moore, your argument is one that is based on your belief of the power of the market, that the market unrestrained creates more opportunity for homeownership, and that homeownership is the direction the city should move in rather than rentership, though rentership has its place. But you're saying that our policy in the past has shied away from wealth creation through homeownership and towards putting people in positions where renting is their easiest, sometimes only choice, and therefore permanently excluding them from an important wealth creation strategy or tool. Am I reading too much into that? Or correct me, please. I'm just trying to get
No,
a
no,
sense.
you've got a big portion of it, Al. It's the market, but it's plus you have to add what are our city priorities, policies, and guidelines that are regulating that market. And for
Yes, yes,
years, our city has prioritized renting to the
yes,
exclusion of everything else. And our priorities and even our messaging has
yes.
confused the issue for people. A lot of people, when they think about affordable housing, don't actually know what we're talking about. Affordable housing is a very strict and restricted community. It's not every person who's renting an apartment. If you look downtown, those luxury apartments down there, that's not part of our affordable housing community. Those are people that are choosing to live downtown and pay $3,000, $3,500, $4,000 a month for rent because that's what they want. And we don't need policies that target people that are paying that amount of money because of
Agreed,
choice. We
agreed.
need targeted policies that specifically identify and acknowledge exactly who is a part of our affordable housing community. And we need policies that absolutely target them and do what we can for them so that their rents go down, so that
And
their
this, Mickey, this is
supplies
where
and
we can work
opportunities,
together.
just a moment, Tekken, so
Yep,
that
yep.
their supplies and opportunities go up, and that the overall demand for affordable housing goes down. And let me put it to you this way, in a way that most people can understand. If you are paying as much for rent as you would be able to pay for a mortgage to own a home, something is wrong. And we as a city owe it to ourselves and to our residents to do the best possible thing we can for everybody. It's a win-win. It's a win for the residents, and it's a win for our city to make sure we're giving people every opportunity to buy in and be a part of that home ownership opportunity, whether it's offering low or no down payment assistance choices, whether it's closing cost assistance, whether we're waiving property taxes, whatever we have to do to incentivize the developers to create more affordable housing, we need to pressure them to do the right thing that works for our residents. Right now, we're giving the developers free reign to do whatever they want in our city. And all rent control is going to do is give them the excuse to develop in Richfield or St. Louis Park or Hopkins or Eden Prairie or some surrounding ring suburb that doesn't have rent control and doesn't have the adverse policies that are going to restrict their profit margins. So we don't want to burn all of our bridges, and at the same time, we're not even focusing on solving the problems for our residents. So we need a new policy and priority shift where we're going 180 degrees in the opposite direction, focusing on getting as many homeowners as we possibly can and shrinking this home ownership gap that leads the nation right now. We talked a few weeks ago about that Star and Tribune article, and that was just one component of the gaps that exist between minority communities and other communities in our city. We need to start working and focusing on the reality of solving those problems.
So I just want to say real quick, that Mickey, again, I absolutely agree. The issue, and I want to differentiate myself from many activists, is that activists have crafted language and a plan that would be blanket rent stabilization. I do not agree with that. I think Mickey can meet me there. Mickey, I encourage you to look at my plan. I think it is that targeted approach that you're talking about.
I just want to say,
as
someone who has lived on both sides, I see each of your views. Yeah. And I think it's, with regards to you, Tech, and like you said, it's where you live. Mickey, it's regards to your belief, more or less. Because like I said, as a renter who went from a homeowner, I could see both sides. Mm-hmm. You said, so you got to look at both sides. Everybody can't be a homeowner, but they can be a renter. You see where I'm coming from? So I see both sides. That's what I want to say.
But we also need to correct the city's thinking. Renting is not equity.
Let me bring Alicia in. Alicia, how you doing, my friend? Good to see you. You're kind of in the shade. I don't know if you have a light you can put on in front, or maybe it's your cap that's giving.
It might be my cap. But
okay. But
let me turn it around. I got a bad hair day, so
that'll help. And maybe that's much better. But if there's light you can put on in front of you, that'd be awesome as well. You can bring a light in front or turn at the window, something like that,
Yeah.
There we go. All
I'm
right,
kind of in my office. But
there we go. Now we see you. Thank you so much. Alicia, good to see you again.
You too.
What I've done today is ask the candidates to reintroduce themselves one more time and take as much time as they need to talk about why they're running for office. What I want to do is allow for your voice unfettered, to ring through and for you to make your case to voters about your vision and how you can support their success as citizens, as residents, as members of our community. So, Alicia, the microphone is yours.
Well, thank you for having me. Hi, Miss Diane. It's good to see you always. Mickey and Taki, nice to see y'all folks as well. But I'm here today. I joined on as the executive director, not as a candidate for the park board at large, although I appreciate the opportunity to plug the fact that I'm running if folks haven't heard. But, I was listening to Tech and Mickey and having their discussion, and I think it's fruitful discussion and it's necessary, right? And I've listened to y'all over the last couple of months, and it's great to see you elevate your position and take on what you hear people saying out in the public. I must acknowledge that, to hear you months ago and to hear you today, is the growth, right? And the ability to adapt and say, well, maybe my stance here might have been wrong 6 months ago. But now, I've listened to the people that I'm asking to vote for me and trust with the state of our city. So it's good to hear that growth. I appreciate that. And I don't know if you've even recognized that in yourselves, but I certainly appreciate it as a fellow resident of this city. I can't vote for neither one of you folks because I don't live in any of your wards, but certainly it's just good to hear leadership be transformative, and your ability to know that the way things were a year ago are not the way that they are now today, and recognizing the urgency for that development and for that change is super critical to me, and I appreciate that. And especially because all of my residents live in the 9th Ward, and so it's a critical place for Mickey in terms of the type of constituents that he wants to vote for him and his leadership that he desires to take on to city council. And also because I know that this election is by far the most critical election that the city of Minneapolis will ever see in my entire lifetime. And that's a whole statement, because I think I have at least another 60 or 70 years to live. But it will certainly set the path for what we see in the future. And I think that we all have to have that that's foresight, right? And fortitude to know that while you're being elected for 2 years, and then there'll be, you know, a bunch of political changes to the landscape and so on and so forth, it is so critical what we're talking about. We're talking about for the next 2 years, setting policies, putting policies into place, and making changes to our city. And not just for one subset of people, but for all people, truly building a Minneapolis that is for all people, right? And we know that we have a bunch of forgotten folks in the Twin Cities. And in particular in Minneapolis, we talked about the home ownership, we talked about renters, we talked about just equity in general, we talked about this idea of public safety and how everybody is wrapped up in public safety from just a policing standpoint, when we know that public safety is so much bigger than just policing. If we only focus on policing, then we are failing the same people that all of the folks claim that they're standing up and being allies and partnership for. Like, we are just completely failing if we look at public safety from a police perspective, knowing that, like, we're talking about poverty, we're talking about the lack of access, we're talking about all of those things. And so many of us have been so far marginalized that we are no longer on this page that we consider in this book of consideration. And so it's about getting the folks on the page. You can't consider them until you acknowledge that they are in existence. And so I'm excited to see what becomes of this city council, this mayor, and the leadership of all of our intergovernmental agencies in November, because it's critical. And collaboration and partnership and compromise will be key. That will be the key to our success. Not one of the current positions that are up for election are minimum. Every position and every person running is critical to the full success of our city. And so nothing is to be minimized, not from the parks to the board of estimation to city council to the mayor. It's so critical, because what we will need to do is work together in a way that nobody has had to work together for a very long time. And we're talking about working together for the true good of the people, which is really difficult. It's really easy to say. It's extremely difficult to do, because everybody wants to stay where they are, and nobody wants this idea of other people being equal.
Alicia, let me ask you to weigh in. You can say yes or no on your candidacy. You said you joined as the executive director of Corcoran, and we appreciate that and your support and partnership. But I have to, number one, thank you, and always acknowledge that you've made a decision to bring your ideas into the political ring as a candidate for Park Board. So again, if you're comfortable with it, I'd like for you to take some time to talk about why you chose to run for the Park Board. What are the issues that you want to address as a Park Board commissioner? What have been the successes and failures of the existing administration, but more importantly, what vision ought to be in place to bring our community into its future?
Yeah. So for me, the reason I chose to run for Park Board was simple. COVID is what sort of pushed me over the edge. And as many of you know, and as you know, Mr. McFarlane, I came from the Y. So I started my professional career fresh out of grad school as a YMCA director. And so I worked there for over a decade. And after leaving the Y and having young people call me and say, Miss Alicia, what do I do? Like, where can I go? What are you doing? Can I come to your office? Can you figure out what we can do? It was a lot. It was overwhelming. And on top of the fact that I have people in my neighborhood where I work at corporate, and I have seniors in my neighborhood saying, like, what do I do to be engaged, to not suffer this isolation alone, and do so safely? And so really, for me, that was the thing that's just sort of pushed me over the edge. I already had an invested interest in our parks as a participant growing up my entire life, and then as a coach, and now as a mother of two young boys who participate in everything from sports to arts at the park. it's so critical that we have a strong park, right? It's important for recreation, it's important for leadership development, it's important for skill building. And this is the place where you make your friends, like your neighborhood friends, where you meet people, where you get to know some of the folks in your community. And so it was so critical. And I just saw that as a failure of our park system during COVID, during the height of COVID, where everything was closed. The parkways were open for people to kind of walk and experience, but if you didn't live near a parkway, what the heck were you doing? You were just sort of left to your own devices, and there was no programming being offered. There was no respite for young people to be able to say, I need a break from my laptop. I need a break from my device. I need a break from this. The parks have always been that safe escape for many young people. And so when we talk about why I decided to run, that was the single issue right there, was just seeing the lack of access during such a pivotal time in our like society, and in particular in our city. Like we were dealing with not only COVID, but we were dealing with the height of the unrest. We were dealing with schools being closed, with everything being closed. If you were a young person, there was literally nothing for you to do. If you were an adult,
So
you
Alicia,
could drink.
let me jump in. So here's what I hear you saying, and thank you for saying it. I hear you saying that at a time where um, there was a massive need, a great need for access to resources and alternatives and different ways to engage community safely. And when we had a resource that the community owned in the parks, that there was a deafening silence, that
Yes.
there was a failure to engage and communicate and to bring those assets into a way of of uh, supporting families and communities through the pandemic and through the unrest. Am I overstating the case?
No, you absolutely have captured it spot on. That's it. That was my motivation. And so as I run this race, my 3 points that I always tell people is about people, programs, and safety, and not just one's physical safety, right? And so that's why I leave it as that, not public safety, but all forms of safety, because you can be in a safe space in terms of like your physical body and still not feel safe. And so we have to acknowledge that it's not about just, oh, well, if I go to this neighborhood park, there's not going to be a shooting. Well, that doesn't mean that you're not going to be harassed by the neighbors who says, hey, why is these little black kids over here in this park? You don't live here. Well, this is a safe park. If I go to my neighborhood park, I have to be ready to duck and cover. And so the reality of it is that we have to look at these things in its totality, right? And figuring out how to do that in partnership with other agencies that have different resources. Like the park could literally just sit in the middle when we talk about schools and we talk about the city council. Like the park is such a great resource. It's not just about, oh, going to shoot hoops or going to do arts and crafts. There's so many different things and different skill sets that we can leverage and pour into our park so that it serves as a kind of a neutral ground.
Listen, we're out of time. This has been a great hour. I want to thank all of you, Mickey, Tekken, and Alicia, for being here and for your service and for your candidacy. Thank you, my friend Diana, for your support and your underwriting, yours and that of the Human Project, underwriting the Conversation with Down program every day. And thank you for that. Diana, you and I are going to be together again Wednesday morning early for the October meeting of the Hawthorne Huddle, right? You want to give people a quick view and invite them to join us
Actually, it's going to be Thursday at
Thursday morning.
7:30 in the morning. And I think, if you guys haven't gotten the agenda, you can send me an email. I'll send you a copy of the agenda. But we're having a great topic around homelessness, homeowners, and renters. Because guess what? What time is it getting ready to be? Eviction time. We got to talk about it. So, Al, get ready because it's going to be a good one.
Okay, Thursday morning, 7:30. And that will be, we hope to have that organized to stream it live to Facebook and to YouTube as we produce it live. I checked Tekken and same thing. We're not getting anything on Facebook. Have you been monitoring Facebook while we're doing this at all? And so Facebook must be down. That's amazing.
Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I think all of the major social media outlets are actually down. They like posted everywhere that.
Anybody know why?
A mass.
Are we gonna blame it on the Russians? Or is it the Cubans?
Well, there are a few connected with us on YouTube. We use YouTube as a way to record these, and we generate them to our audiences via Facebook. So hopefully when Facebook comes around again, we'll be able to get this conversation out. Obviously, we write about this, and I think Mickey and Tekken and Alicia, you can expect our editorial columnist, Brenda Loud Gray, to do a major piece on your presentations today. We want to make sure that your voices also get presented in our newspaper, Insight News. So thank you for the clarity and conviction that you bring to this work. And I want to thank Linda Sloan, who's watching on YouTube. And she said to you, Alicia, well said. And she raised the question of why is it an either or versus an and in, I think, addressing the question of home ownership versus renting. So I think we're getting somewhere in these conversations. Linda, thank you for your work over at the Council on Minnesotans of African Heritage. We'll see you all next time. See you tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Oh, Queen Justice, where are you? Did they beat you up or no? Lock you on the ground, take the crown away from you?
Oh, Lady Liberty, red, white, and blue. Did they take your dignity with their bigotry? Teach you that you're born to lose.
Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you break.
We've had enough
of all the money you make.
We've had enough.
No more life at stake.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation.
It's been 400 years and we're 400 late. Together we stand from state to state. Going back in time won't make America great. We need justice now, people won't wait.
Action, no more distraction. Every step we take, we gain traction. If it can happen to one, it can happen to all. United we stand, divided we fall. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you were breaking.
We had enough
of all the money you were making.
We had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We had enough.
This is a proclamation.
Free or guilty,
It's gonna get filthy. You better believe.
just roll up your sleeves.
It's gonna get rough. It's gonna be tough.
We all agree, we've had enough. We've had enough
Of all the rules you're breaking.
We've had enough.
All the money you're making.
We've had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We've had enough.
This is the proclamation.
We've had enough.
Trayvon Martin and Tommy Rice.
We've had enough.
Michael Brown and Eric gonna pay the price.
We've had enough.
Philando, Breonna, George Floyd.
What? We've had enough.
So many gone. How can we fill the void?
How can we feel?
We had enough.